Professor Solari belonged to a select group of scientists highly skilled from basic and applied research up to design and codification. He equally adopted analytical and numerical tools, as well as laboratory and full-scale experiments. Indeed, such integrated methodology was one of the major strengths of his activity. Thanks to his career-long commitment, Professor Solari set up and consolidated the GS Wind Iron Research Group on Wind Engineering and Structural Dynamics, one of the largest and most qualified at the international level in such domains. The wind tunnel at the University of Genoa was built under his leadership by investing his own research funds and by managing private and public contributions. Professor Solari played a major role in the foundation and development of wind engineering. He focused his efforts in many fields, such as the Elan wind, crosswind, and torsional responsive structures, the equivalent static wind actions, the equivalent wind spectrum technique, wind-induced fatigue damage, and wind speed statistics. The research conducted by Professor Solari has recently made a major impact on downbursts as well. In fact, he developed the first statistical analysis of the properties of thunderstorm outflows relevant to the wind loading of structures. He could achieve it by exploiting the huge potential of a wind monitoring network, perhaps unique in the world, that was set up in the frame of 2 European projects he coordinated. Considering these results and the achievements received in a long-standing and outstanding career, the European Research Council, the ERC, awarded him an advanced grant 2016 for the Project Thunder. Often considered second only to the Nobel Prize, such ERC advanced grant was the only one awarded in the wind engineering domain so far. In addition, he played a relevant role in the analysis, design, and performance assessment of a number of iconic structures, such as the Leaning Tower of Pisa, the Messina Straits Bridge, the Brancusi Endless Column. In parallel, Professor Solari devoted his work to the international codification of wind actions on structures, coordinating several national and international committees that often adopted his own methodology. From all these pioneering contributions arise the quality, quantity, and diversity of Professor Solari's activities. Among his books, let us recall the Springer Tracts in Wind Science and Engineering. Moreover, he published nearly 150 papers in peer-reviewed journals and delivered keynote lectures at major international conferences in wind engineering, as well as in the broad fields of structural engineering and mechanics. Professor Solari is the only scientist in the world that was awarded the 4 most prestigious medals in the wind engineering sector: the Cermak Medal, the Davenport Medal, the Flaxbart Medal, and the Scanlan Medal. Several universities from all over the world honored the achievements of Professor Solari by offering him outstanding research and educational positions in China, Uruguay, and Canada. He was also awarded a doctorate honoris causa by the Technical University of Civil Engineering of Bucharest. Professor Solari significantly impacted the life of dozens of students, postdoc fellows, and visiting scientists. Some of his former PhD students are now the core of the GS Wind Iron Research Group at the University of Genoa. Several others hold important positions at foreign universities or at well-known engineering companies. Finally, other students who reached Genoa from any continent returned to their home countries carrying the mark of the Genoese school. Professor Solari was really a giant in the wind engineering field. All the wind engineering community can benefit from the example he set with his love, enthusiasm, and dedication to research and education. Especially young talents can take inspiration and learn from his great legacy.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On behalf of the research group in wind engineering and structural dynamics of the University of Genoa, I thank you very much for being present at this online event in memory of our dear Professor Giovanni Solari. Let's start with a brief institutional opening. I leave the floor to the Rector of the University of Genoa, Professor Federico Delfino, whom we thank very much for his presence here.
Good afternoon. I thank you, my colleagues, for organizing this meeting in memory of Professor Giovanni Solari, an outstanding scholar, a guide and a friend for all of us. He was a pioneer in the field of wind engineering. His catching passion for research and teaching enabled him to found an influential school, renowned and appreciated around the world, although he remained in Italy, where the great research infrastructure for wind engineering were few in comparison with other countries. He made this apparent disadvantage the strength of his long and successful life of researcher and professor. It was the stimulus to study deeply, always keeping in his mind the focus as well as the aim of every research. Therefore, he put Genoa at the center of important international connections. At the very beginning of my career, I had the privilege to participate in a European project coordinated by Professor Solari, Giovanni. I was amazed by his precise and detailed description of the work we were to start. In particular, he paid attention to the aspects of the applied research. It was clear to me that he regarded the project as an instrument to get tangible achievements and not only an effort and a challenge for scholars. He left us too soon, but his inheritance is as real as the results of his projects. A group of young and experienced researchers in structural and wind engineering will learn from him that it is not important where they study, but how they study, with passion, tenacity, and curiosity. These elements along together with Professor Solari, my friend Giovanni. Together with his skill, competence, and open-mindedness, created the Genoese School, which is now a leading center of excellence of wind engineering at international level. Thank you very much, Giovanni.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Now, let me introduce you to the Dean of the Scuola Politecnica of the University of Genoa, Professor Giorgio Roth.
Thank you. It is a great honor for me to welcome you on behalf of the Polytechnic School of the University of Genoa to this day in memory of our colleague and special friend Giovanni Solari. His commitment to our institution has always been extraordinary. Even when he earned the prestigious European Research Council Award, he decided that our university is a worthy venue to host and promote the development of such high-level scientific research. His affection has always been reciprocated. Our work has some wonderful aspects. The contact with our students, which allow us to consider ourselves university students for life, maintaining a young soul, and the large number of colleagues and friends that over the years we grow and cultivate around the world. We have a real opportunity to become citizens of the world. Some of us are more successful than others in cultivating these aspects. Giovanni was one of those extraordinary guys. Today, with your presence, we have proof of that. We will never forget the energy and vision of the future that allowed him to achieve extraordinary goals, to become a reference point for international scientific research, and to drag generations of students with his enthusiasm. Thank you, Giovanni. Thanks to all of you for being with us on this very special day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, I would like to introduce the head of the Department of Civil, Chemical and Environmental Engineering, Professor Guido Busca, whom we thank for having supported us in organizing the event, together with the Dean of the Scuola Politecnica, Professor Giorgio Roth. Please.
Good afternoon. Only a few words to greet and thank everyone is present, and also to shortly remind that after having been the director of the Department of Construction Science in our university, Giovanni Solari was one of the founders of the Department of Civil, Chemical and Environmental Engineering. And he was also the dean of our department, which means for us that he was the professor with the most seniority in the role of full professors. He was a member in the last 10 years of the Department Strategic Commission, and played an important role by cooperating with wisdom to the management of the department and to the management of the teaching and research activities of the full department, and in promoting the best young people, young scientists and young teachers here. So I am also grateful to him, not only for the very good scientific work he did in his life, also for his friendly approach and his collaboration in the management of the department in the last years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Busca. Let me now tell you briefly about some of the first initiatives we are making in honor of Giovanni. Giovanni started thinking about a new book in the second half of 2019. The book is titled in Italian, Nel vento e nell'ingegneria, which I can try to translate in English as In Wind and Engineering. Is not of scientific nature, but deals with Giovanni's life journey through human and professional experiences. Giovanni contacted Genoa University Press for the publication of the book in the summer of 2020 through Professor Angelo Schenone, coordinator of the editorial committee. The Italian version of the book will soon be published in paper and digital form. On the side, you can see the cover of the book in print. The copyright of the book will be donated by Giovanni family to the Gigi Ghirotti Association. The book will later be translated into English as well. A second initiative is about a new name of our research group. Giovanni had chosen the acronym WINDINE for the research group. It therefore seemed to us natural to keep it and rename our group as Giovanni Solari Wind Engineering and Structural Dynamics Research Group, GS WINDINE. You can see in the slide the home page of the new website, where Giovanni's personal website will be kept inside, under the heading About Us. Finally, we would like to remember Giovanni trying to promote periodic events in his name, in the spirit of his scientific activity. In this regard, our idea concerns the proposal of the Giovanni Solari Award for PhD thesis and Giovanni Solari Scientific Lectures. We hope that it will be possible to implement them in agreement with the Italian and the International Association of Wind Engineering. Now, 3 memories from UNIGE colleagues. I give a floor to Professor Sergio Lagomarsino, full professor of engineering mechanics, the same Italian scientific sector of Giovanni, close to Gianni at the beginning of his career.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It was not easy to pick what to say about Gianni among the experience I share with him. He was one of who made me passionate about research, who taught me a lot in the early years, and I worked all my life in the room next to him. Giovanni Solari was not yet an assistant professor when in 1982 taught me the basics of earthwork engineering, and he was the assistant of Professor Di Nostura in the course of structural dynamics, and an optional short course on earthwork engineering with additional hours was introduced. And I guess that at that time it was one of the few in Italy. I asked him to be my tutor for the degree thesis, and together with Professor Andrea Del Grosso, they proposed me to go deeper into the topic of seismic soil amplification. Just after the degree examination, he proposed me to stay in the university, carrying out the research work, and it was really challenging and exciting to work with him because I had the opportunity to learn really a lot by him. When he had a new idea to take a research topic, the approach to the problem was rigorous. The solution was always framed in a general methodology, and the actual applicability in the engineering practice was not an option for him. But first of all, making research with him was a pleasure and a real enjoyment. It was very organized and did not like to waste time. Everything he decided to do, he did it with the same maximum effort because worth to be considered. Nothing was improvised or taken lightly. I remember he used to write down by hands things to do on squared sheets, one after the other in no specific order. And when he completed to do something, he crossed it out. Until everything was crossed out, there were a few things, he transcribed them into most recent sheets and threw the old one away. At the time, information technology was not yet developed, but I believe he never abandoned this practice. And he loved his job almost as much as the Genoa football team. This was the only thing on which we did not agree. I remember my first work conference on earthquake engineering held in Tokyo in 1988. I want to share video. Sorry. Okay, I hope you can see. A large delegation from the department attended at the conference, and it was exciting to find myself alongside with the professors, also sharing the experience of an exotic journey. This picture was taken during a post-conference tour in Malaysia. Gianni is well recognized in the center of the picture, and you can also see Professor Dino Stura, Professor Alfredo Corsano, Gandera del Grosso, and I am the youngest, a little boy on the right. And here we are in a farm, and all along the journey, the recommendation was not to eat or drink anything that was not packaged due to danger of food infection. But as you can see, we could not resist bananas and pineapples. Until the beginning of the 90s, I worked with him also on wind engineering, in particular on statistical analysis of return periods, wind speeds, and on structural damping of buildings. Then I decided to find my way in seismic vulnerability and in modeling of masonry buildings, but the relationship with Gianni always remained honest and effective. When he was elected head of the Department of Structural and Geotechnical Engineering, he asked me to be the deputy dean, and it was a pleasure to help him. He was not particularly interested in academic position because he knew they took away time from research, but he also fulfilled this task with great commitment and vision. In conclusion, I would like to thank Gianni for being an important part of my life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sergio. Now, let me introduce Professor Giuseppe Casalino, full professor of control and robotics, who shared academic experiences with Gianni.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody, and thank you to the organizers for having given me the honor of remembering my friend, Giovanni Solari. Actually, I met Giovanni Solari when we were young students, but I had the opportunity of spending a substantial part of 2 years together with him. When we together, at the same time, we became full professor. And there is a certain tradition in Italy that when you become a full professor, you are transferred to another university. And we were together in University of Calabria at about 1,500 kilometers from Genoa, while we were together maintaining courses in Genoa. And so every week we were spending the evening and even the night in the same wagon of a train that was bringing us from Genoa to Cosenza. We had a lot of time to spend together, and we consolidated a good friendship. It was amazing speaking with him about any subject, but in particular about science. Now, you know, I'm from, let's say, electric control engineering, and my specialization is robotics. Well, robotic structures are actually the opposite of the civil structure, because my structures are mobile, and when they are in the static condition, they are maintaining static just due to the control. And they are, in Italian, they say very not constrained structure. And building that it was carrying are instead a constrained structure. But since mechanics is mechanic, when a constrained structure like a building is stimulated by the wind, or maybe a robotic structure is stimulated by some external action, vibration occur. And then we found in that during the time we were spending together, the time of discussion about the similarity and the connections between the two, let's say, fields. We had provided ourselves that when we had the possibility of coming back to Genova and working, to try to find some commonality in the control of robotic structure and eliminating vibration, and maybe actively controlling the vibration that can be introduced by wind in the building. At that time, it was consolidating its study on wind engineering, and that has been so successful in the following years. And we have seen all the prize and medal and reconnaissance that he had all over the world. And unfortunately, we never find the time on working together, and it is something that it's remaining in my mind as a lacking. Nevertheless, I have been the honor of being a friend of Gianni, and Gianni also was a friend of mine. And when I knew that he was passing away, it was a really strong heart at my heart. And so I still remember that time when we were together. And I want, just for now, mainly remembering that I had the honor of being a real friend of Gianni. So thank you so much, Gianni, for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Casalino. And finally, we present to you Professor Massardo, former Dean of the Scuola Politecnica, full Professor of Advanced Energy Systems.
Thank you for inviting me to talk about Giovanni. Giovanni was a friend, but I never worked with him, and I never had sharing research with him, since I am from another area, completely different. The first time I met Giovanni was not very nice. We represented the civil engineering area and the mechanical engineering area in a faculty meeting, and we had very strong, hard conflict. As usually, Giovanni was very strong when it was necessary to convince people that his idea was the best, and I do the same. But in the passing of the time, we understood that we had similar vision, and we really appreciate that the allocation of resources in the university must be done for people working properly, obtaining good results. When I became Dean of a Polytechnic school in 2012, Giovanni was always full of suggestions for me and supported me strongly in the main topic. You remember, my colleagues could remember the shift of a school in another place, named Erzelli Hills. Giovanni not only supported my decision, but also my person strongly attacked by politicians at that time, and you can remember very easily. In that period, Giovanni was always, when I met him, was always positive. I only remember his bitterness when he invited the Archistar, Dr. Calatrava, for speaking about the bridge in Genoa. It was just before the Genoa bridge collapses. It was strange, we suspect. His bitterness was due to the fact that not all the people in the faculty appreciated this decision. And I think it is a good opportunity for us to have Calatrava and to listen and talk with him at the time. And the possibility to have such a high-level Archistar was due to the high-level quality of research done by Giovanni. I had another very interesting experience with Giovanni in 2015. It is related to European Research Council. In 2015, I submitted a proposal at the Advanced grant for a grant, and at the time I was chair of a consolidator grant in ERC. So we talked a lot of time with Giovanni about ERC, about the organization, about the system, and so on. After my submission, Giovanni informed me in a very easy way that he's presented in the same area, in the same panel, another idea. And it was very strange. I immediately feel that Giovanni was the one to beat on. And both of us passed the difficult step one, a great success for me, waiting for step two. And we are waiting together. We believe it to be successful. The decision at the end for me is my proposal was in a waiting list, and Giovanni was the winner. So I had a good feel when I decided to bet on him. But after a few hours of the results, Giovanni visited me in the office of the dean, and with an incredible sensitivity to help me in my field. I was not very happy for my results, but at the time I understood that our friendship had a very quantum step. It was a fantastic one. I met Giovanni not only in the faculty, but for many times around the world. The main favorite places were airports, and around the world we met for a few minutes. And these short meetings were for me, and I suppose also for Giovanni, very important. A sort of full immersion in our life, in our research, in our friendship, in our family. We talk also about our family, my sons, his sons, and so on. It was very, very rare and very important, short and very strong, very effective. So now everything has been carried out by the wind, the main topic of his life. As you know, people know that Genoa is a very windy town, and both of us are born and grew up in this unique city. Every morning when I go out and the wind is on my face, this represents the Giovanni voice, the voice of the Lord of the wind. And every day is still with me and with all of us. Don't forget the Lord of the wind. Don't forget.
Thank you very much, Professor Massardo, for this sincere remembrance of Giovanni. Now, I leave the floor to Massimiliano Burlando, who will introduce the next group of speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next session of presentations, in which there are some memories from 5 distinguished international scholars who are members of the International Advisory Board of the Project Thunder and have been very close friends of Giovanni for many years. The first speaker is Professor Yukio Tamura from the Chongqing University in China. Please, Professor Tamura.
Okay, thank you. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. 5 months have already passed since my dear friend, Professor Giovanni Solari, died. Still, nothing can fill the aching void left by his death. I'm sure you all feel the same way. I'm grateful to be given the opportunity to honor Giovanni and to celebrate the gift that he presented to us. I'd like first to express my sincere condolences to his family, Simonetta, Davide, and Matteo. We can describe him in various ways: taciturn and self-effacing gentleman, a most esteemed professor, a great star in the structural and wind engineering field, but more importantly, he was the best father, always thinking of his family. He always tried to be the best researcher, the best professor, and the best father. As everybody knows, he made great contributions in our wind engineering field. He did everything he could do and never omitted anything in his research. He accomplished almost everything perfectly in the university, in our society, and also in his family as a father. I first met him in 1979 at the 5th International Conference on Wind Engineering held in Colorado, and again at other international conferences on wind engineering. But I'm not sure what we talked. But I clearly remember that we talked in 1991 at the 8th International Conference on Wind Engineering, London, Ontario. At that time, I was already aware of his great contributions in wind engineering, especially the closed-form solution of along wind and 3D responses. So we talked about this topic. In 1994, the East European Conference on Wind Engineering was held in Warsaw, and there were only a few delegates from Japan and probably from Italy either, and we felt rather isolated. So often we talked during the conference and became very close friends. The following year, 1995, I organized the International Wind Engineering Forum on damping in buildings in our city, and he kindly delivered a keynote lecture. I first visited Genoa in 1997, and I have a wonderful memory of his beautiful city. In 2003, we had an enjoyable time in Lubbock, Texas, at the 11th International Conference, which was a very important and a memorial conference for our wind engineering community, as everybody knows. The International Association for Wind Engineering was inaugurated, and he was unanimously elected as the first president. In 2005, he first visited my home, and it was unforgettable that he brought the wonderful but very heavy cheese all the way from Italy. That was definitely the tastiest cheese I've ever had. The 12th International Conference of Wind Engineering was also a memorial conference for us, where his IAW presidency was handed over to me. He kindly visited Japan many times to support our activities, and also visited me many times China after I moved there, in spite of his very busy schedule. I have many wonderful memories with Giovanni as well as Watson. We talked about various things, including our research, our society, our lives, and our families. The 15th International Conference on Wind Engineering held in Beijing was unfortunately the last conference where we met in person. At that time, he was still very active, and we never foresaw the current sadness. In the same year, he published a really unique and valuable book, and I was very honored to have the opportunity to write a review of this masterpiece. It will surely become a great classic in the wind engineering field. When Giovanni Solari died, a piece of me was lost. Maybe you all feel the same. I've been inspired many times by what he has done. He taught me a lot in various ways throughout his life. We have many intangible and tangible assets left by him. Now we should consider what we can do for the benefit of society based on what we learned from him. Thank you, Giovanni. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Tamura. Now the next speaker is Professor Bert Blocken from the Eindhoven University of Technology in the Netherlands. Please, Professor Blocken.
Thank you very much, Professor Burlando. I will try to share my screen with all of you. So I hope you can soon see it. Yeah, so I think that today probably the word that will be most often used is the word friend, and I think that that means a lot and says a lot about what a fantastic colleague Giovanni has always been. I certainly would like to also, in the beginning of this very short presentation, thank all these fantastic colleagues whom I had the pleasure of collaborating with in the past, and it's thanks to Giovanni indeed that there's such a fantastic team there in Genoa. I think you probably know that Ted Statopoulos and me wrote a short obituary in the journal, and I would like to just mention a few items from that. So, and that was actually a very interesting event where I first traveled abroad out of the continent, and I had the pleasure of meeting Giovanni Solari for me for the first time in a small island actually south of South Korea, Jeju Island, in a beautiful hotel that nevertheless was at the opposite place of the island than the airport. So it so happened that at the end of the conference, at 4 o'clock in the morning, two people were standing in the lobby waiting for the bus. It was a large bus, but only 3 people inside, the driver, Giovanni and myself. And well, both of us were indeed quite a lot younger than we were recently. So I think what is important and what I always remember from and remembered from Giovanni is that he was, to me, the definition of what is a real engineer. And I think all of you know, the engineer is a word that comes from Latin, like many of our words. And Latin comes from Italy. I think you also know that. And it actually means that you create something, you generate something. And I think this is also a very nice quote by Theodor von Karman saying that, okay, scientists are very important because they study the world as it is, but engineers are at least equally important because they try to make the world a better place. And I think that really is what Giovanni has been doing in his life, focusing indeed on inventing, designing, analyzing, building structures. I think also in the good tradition of Italian engineering, this engineering is based on a very solid knowledge of mathematics, physics, and chemistry. And I also think that in that respect, Giovanni is really an example because he knows the science and he knows how to apply it in engineering. And it's actually these two words indeed that are on the cover of this fantastic book. So I think this testifies again that he is really a true example of a scientist and an engineer. Of course, I will not go in detail here. Everybody knows that Giovanni received the first ERC grant in wind engineering, which is, of course, a fantastic achievement. And he has a strong legacy, I think, in many different ways. And maybe one of the most important ones, which the whole world is benefiting from, is his tremendous amount of work for the International Association of Wind Engineering, where he was president and then succeeded by Professor Tamura and Professor Karim. And indeed, life is short, but art is long. And I think Giovanni's legacy will probably be with us and with this world for as long as this world will exist. So to conclude, I think what is in order is gratitude to Giovanni, to all what he did. And it's special that I think Giovanni himself was actually an example of a person that was always very grateful. And if we talk about virtues and things that are really important in life, I always have to think about this sentence when I think about Giovanni, and that he is really somebody that whatever you did for him, he always felt that was more important than what he was doing for others. And for somebody that did an enormous amount of important work for the society, for many individuals, I think this really means a lot. So I want to conclude by my memory of him, and that's the way I want to remember him. And that's his very kind and modest smile, and maybe a little bit of an uncomfortable smile when at this ERC symposium, I showed first this slide, and I was talking about another fantastic Italian investigator, Giovanni Battista Venturi. And after that, I looked at him and I showed the next slide and I said, well, this is another fantastic Giovanni. So grazie Giovanni per tutto e grazie amici.
Thank you, Bert, for this wonderful presentation. Our next speaker is Professor Horia Hangan from the University of Western Ontario in Canada. Please, Professor Hangan.
Hello, everybody. Hello, friends of Giovanni. I just wanted to introduce Giovanni as a Renaissance man. A Renaissance man in pursuit of perfection. First of all, Giovanni was a teacher. I mean, we all know he was a researcher, but he was such an admirable teacher. He came at Western, taught for a couple of summers, and he made all of us jealous because he would get the highest evaluations ever in the School of Engineering at Western. He achieved that by spending essentially his whole day with the students. He would end the lecture, and afterwards he would be followed by a cohort of students asking questions and he explaining. An admirable teacher. Another part of Giovanni is being a huge colleague. There's a picture in 2019, which is, I believe, the last time I've seen Giovanni in person, the University of Bucharest, where him and my esteemed colleague Arsam Karim came to join me in a ceremony that took place there. And there is nothing more important than being in between two friends and two giants of wind engineering. Next slide. Giovanni was most of all a friend, and he loved to dine his friends and to introduce them to Genoa. He loved Genoa. He knew every corner of it, and he would introduce us to the most interesting and intimate restaurants in Genoa, and he was really a man of Genoa and a dear, dear friend. However, I don't know how many of you know that Giovanni, as a Renaissance man, was in love with art, and he actually being involved with the column of, the endless column of Brancusi, who is Romanian, like me. He knew more about Brancusi than I ever knew in my entire life. He was involved in restoring this column, and next slide. And through that, he actually learned so much about Brancusi that in one of the lectures at Western, he spent 267 slides talking about Brancusi and the art of engineering. So Brancusi and his column was a real chat and a discussion between the two of us. And I remember the night before his presentation in London at Western, he showed me all the results of the testing of the column and the fact that the shape of the column was perfect. And he couldn't figure out why and how is that Brancusi chose this shape. So next slide. Then I remembered a piece of research that I've done in the past with Barry Vickery, in which we looked at this type of shapes, which we call them sinusoidal perturbations, and we defined a space. And this space is the one which is shown in the diagram on the right side, and it's basically the length of the perturbation divided by diameter of the column in this side, in the column of infinity or the endless column. And on the horizontal axis is the intensity of the perturbation divided by lambda, which is the length of the perturbation. And in this space, everything which is on the left of that shaded area, if you perturb the shape in that area, nothing happens. But on the right side of the shaded area, you destroy vortex shedding. And we, together with Giovanni, the night before his presentation, we figure out that the column of infinity, this is how it's called in Romanian, or the endless column as it's called in English, the geometric shape is the circle that you see there, which is a perfect shape to withstand wind and avoid vortex shedding. And so the last question that we had the night before his presentation is, how did Brancusi know that? And next slide, please. In the last moment, I realized, and I told Giovanni, that this is the perfect hourglass figure, feminine figure. It's the perfect proportion. And incredibly, he created this slide, which you see right now. He put it into his presentation. It was the slide 242, and explaining all this concept in front of engineering students, of 100 and something engineering students. So for this, for his love for art, for his love for Brancusi, and for his daring character, to create a slide like that and put it into a public presentation, I totally love Giovanni. Next slide. We did things together, and one of the things that we finished right a couple of weeks before Giovanni passed is actually to create finally a double PhD degree between University of Genoa and Western University, which was a great administrative victory of the academics. And I'm very happy that this happened. And finally, there is this new book that I co-authored with my esteemed colleague, Professor Aksam Karim. And this book is actually dedicated to Giovanni Solari. Ciao, Giovanni. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hangan. Now let me introduce to Professor Ran Karim of the University of Notre Dame from the United States. Please, Professor Karim.
Okay, greetings, everybody. I'm very excited in a way to celebrate the life of my very, very dear friend, Giovanni Solari, whom, just like Professor Tamura said, we met in 1979. And ever since, our friendship of three of us has really grown and very close, not only in professional ways, but also with the families. This particular picture you're seeing on the left, we both like to ask each other after our presentation some penetrating questions. And this was in Japan, and I did that, and Giovanni answered it very well. So he's triumphantly walking towards me, and I took his picture. And on the right-hand side, you see the good times at the VBA in Milano, where we were at Lake Como for a banquet along with Professor Tamura and my wife. As you heard, that Professor Solari received Jack Cermak Medal, and I had the honor of presenting him at one of the ASCE Structures Congress. And on the right, you see us having at awards banquet where this award was given to him. This is another occasion at America's Conference in Wind Engineering at San Juan, Puerto Rico on the left. And on the right, you see many faces you can recognize, and including his son, David, and other prominent wind engineering professors, Koch and John Holmes and Kaspersky in a Japanese restaurant in Tokyo. Giovanni and I traveled with Professor Tamura from Tokyo to see this multi-fan wind tunnel at Miyazaki. And here you see with us in front of the tunnel, and also at a local restaurant for very enjoyable Japanese lunch. On the left, you can see in Lubbock where the IAWE was initially formed, and Giovanni was installed the first president of it. And at the same time, Giovanni was also very keen to establish Davenport Medal, because American Society of Civil Engineers have already recognized two major giants in our field, Professor Scanlon and Professor Cermak. And he wanted that there should be a medal. And we thought that a very good outlet would be the International Association for Wind Engineering. And this is in Cairns International Conference, where I was a fortunate one to be one of the first recipients. And you can see the smile and the satisfaction on the face of Giovanni that this thing finally materialized and we were able to give it. We had some, relaxed time. Giovanni and I were taking a walk on the Bund in Shanghai. And, I wanted a cigar after dinner. And Giovanni wasn't too happy with the smoke because it was quite windy over there. So you can see he seems a little uncomfortable with mine. And on the right-hand side, we are up in Jinmao building on the 70th floor at the lobby of the hotel, and where he is enjoying his cappuccino, which he always loved. And you can see he seems very relaxed and calm on that one. On the right-hand side, I think you already saw the picture where we went with the honorary doctorate degree of Professor Horia Hangan, and we participated in the Romanian Wind Engineering Conference. But the most important to me was that Giovanni Solari in 2017 flew for 24 hours all the way from Genoa, Italy to South Bend, Indiana in the United States to attend the wedding of my son. So it was very, very important for me. and he just attended the wedding, and the next day he left back for his home. This picture you already have seen on the right-hand side, Professor Tamura and Giovanni, and a very relaxed mood. I think it was in Cairns, but Professor Tamura says it is in Lubbock, so we'll have to settle that afterwards. And then at the banquet in Amsterdam International Conference, at the award ceremony, you can see this particular color hat was floating around, and everybody who went to the podium had to wear that. And Giovanni resisted in the beginning, but we were able to convince him that he has to wear the hat in order to announce the awards, because he was the chair of the awards committee at that time. This is a little bit technical now, the WIN guy. You know, here is in the conferences, I watch people, what they do, and the conference attendance habits of the famous. So I picked up 3 of the guys. I think one would be my speaker, my good friend, Professor Ted Statopoulos. Then in the middle, you see Professor Solari and my good friend, Yukio on one side. And you can see, those of you who are familiar with Ekman's spiral, as you go up, the angle of the wind changes. And as you see, that is always busy at the conference, looking at responding to probably his journal emails. Giovanni is always alert, probably trying to tune up his PowerPoint. And my good friend Yukio always likes to catch up on his nap during the sessions. So this picture is a very good, it makes a little spiral with Ted bent forward and slowly coming up the direction of wind, and the heads changes. We were in Liège, I think was a better pronunciation. Chris Letchford would correct me if I was wrong. And at this conference in European African a few years ago, we were a very happy moment. As you can see, Giovanni very relaxed and very comfortable with the surroundings here. And in closing, I would say that Giovanni was a towering maven figure in wind engineering, a consummate researcher who dug deep into pressing issues of modeling wind loads and structures through his insightful analysis. His leadership as the first president for Wind Engineering Association provided a sound footing for this organization, and has done very well ever since. As we celebrate his life to carry on his legacy, I think we can all benefit from the example he has set with his love, enthusiasm, and dedication to research, education of students, service to profession, and above all, personal decency. With that, I will stop. Goodbye, Giovanni.
Thank you, Professor Karim. Now the last speaker in this session, Professor Ted Statopoulos from the Concordia University, Canada. Please.
Thank you, Professor Burlando. Dear colleagues, dear friends, it was indeed my honor and pleasure to accept the invitation to say a few words about Giovanni Solari, an outstanding scientist, academic, and most importantly, an excellent colleague and friend of mine. Today, I decided not to talk about Solari's outstanding and unique contributions to the development of the engineering field, not to talk about his excellent attributes as a scientist and as an engineer, about the plethora of awards, distinctions, and prizes Giovanni has received, nor about his second-to-none service to the International Association of Wind Engineering. All this can be found in the In Memoriam article Bert, Blocken, and myself published in the Journal of Wind Engineering and Industrial Dynamics earlier this year, and Bert already referred to that. I will neither refer to Solari's outstanding Springer book, Wind Science and Engineering, for which Yukio Tamura has written a very nice review scheduled to be published in the Journal of Wind Engineering and Industrial Dynamics in a few weeks from now. All this in order to concentrate on some other aspects of Giovanni's qualities as a human being, entrusted and thrived in international academia. His fairness and collegiality were exemplary. His reviews for the Journal of Wind Engineering were not only thorough, but also rigorous and meticulous. His review comments were always constructive and to the point. Although anonymous, he wanted to ensure that his comments would not hurt the authors, particularly if these were junior scientists and engineers or graduate students in the field of wind or structural engineering. When he thought that the paper should be declined, he was always hesitant, and he wanted to give the authors every possible benefit of the doubt prior to making his final recommendation. He was writing to me privately as the editor of the journal, asking whether the other reviewers were agreeable with his recommendation and offering in advance the option to reconsider his position in case of disagreement. I was fortunate to also work with Giovanni in the International Association of Wind Engineering Awards Committee that he chaired until he passed away. Again, this was another set of occasions to admire Giovanni's respect and dedication to the fundamental principles of fairness to everyone. His decisions were always based on the respect of the opinions of all members of the committee, regardless of whether these were in agreement or disagreement with his own opinion or position. Debates with Giovanni were always enjoyable because they were based on critical argumentation and mutual respect, the real essence of collegiality. In addition, Giovanni was extremely hospitable. I recall vividly our meeting of the International Advisory Board of the ERC Thunder Project in Genoa back in September of 2018. At the end of the two-day, very productive meeting, Giovanni was so kind to invite all International Advisory Board members to his apartment near his office at the university. We had a very enjoyable afternoon that day, and everybody appreciated his hospitality. I myself remember that afternoon as if it were yesterday. Giovanni's research ethics, along with his collegiality and sensitivity of his heart, were the highest that I have ever come across in my career. I can hardly think of anyone else whose professionalism, fairness, and collegiality combined with research, teaching, and service to the community skills can be compared. I strongly believe that Giovanni is the absolutely best role model for all of us and the generations of future wind engineers. Let me please express my sincere appreciation and best collegial wishes of recognition to this man. Thank you, Giovanni, for all you have done for us and you offered us.
Thank you to all the speakers for their wonderful presentations. Now I leave the floor to Luisa Pagnini, who is chairman of the next session.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this section that collects some of the friends around the world. And the first contribution is from Professor Chris Baker, University of Birmingham, UK. Please, Professor Baker.
Thank you very much indeed. We have heard much about legacy today, and I want to take that further. Giovanni Solari has left us a very considerable legacy, and I'd like to think about three aspects of this. The first is his legacy to the wind engineering community. He was, of course, the first president of the International Association of Wind Engineering and held that role from 2003 to 2007. But that role involved much more than a ceremonial aspect. He was instrumental in turning the IAWE from a very loose association that met for an extended supper every 4 years at the major conferences to a legally organized society with a properly formulated constitution, member organizations, and a functioning secretariat. This involved much work with lawyers, an unenviable task, and much traveling and discussion. In a real way, the existence of an international wind engineering community is one of Giovanni's major legacies to us. The second aspect I want to mention is his intellectual legacy. Giovanni had the gift of being able to take a complex physical or engineering problem, often in the field of structural dynamics, and to express this problem mathematically in such a way that he could obtain closed-form solutions for the engineering parameters of interest. These are often complex, but allowed a proper appreciation of the role of different material and loading properties to be properly understood and generalized. Giovanni was the master of the closed-form solution, if you like. In these days, when it's so easy and simple to throw computer power at a difficult problem through complex CFD or FE analysis, the need for such closed-form solutions becomes all the more important to inform our calculations and to actually understand the issues in depth. Giovanni's intellectual legacy of doing the hard thinking and analysis before resorting to numerical calculations is a very important one to keep hold of. The third of the legacies I want to mention is a personal one. I believe I first met Giovanni at the first European Conference on Wind Engineering in the early 90s. Certainly we began to correspond after that. And remember, those were the days before the instant gratification of emails. And I paid a memorable visit to Genoa around that time, where the highlight for me was the ability to spend some hours in the library, which was much better resourced in wind engineering terms than that of my own institution. I was received with courtesy and kindness, and Giovanni spent time showing me around the city that he really loved. Over that period, the same courtesy and kindness has been shown by Giovanni to numerous people, from research students at the very start of their careers to the more senior of us. And that is how many of us, myself included, will mainly remember him, for his personal legacy as much as for his undoubted scholarship, organizational and intellectual legacies. As the kindest and most courteous of friends and colleagues, he will be very much missed by many in the community. Giovanni, requiescat in pace. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Baker. And next contribution is by Ileana Calutescu, Technical University of Civil Engineering in Bucharest. Please, Ileana.
Thank you so much. So I would first of all like to say that it is a great honor for me to commemorate Professor Solari at this event, and I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak. I first met Professor Solari in January 2012. Due to a long time friendship that he had with my PhD supervisor, Professor Dan Lungu, he generously accepted me to follow his wind engineering course and then to work with him for my PhD thesis. The friendship between Professor Solari and Professor Lungu actually started in 2000, when Professor Lungu was working on the Brunkush-Endless column. He was doing some analytical studies because the column was undergoing a restoration process, and he was trying to preserve the column's steel spine, which was heavily corroded. So at that time, he contacted Professor Solari to ask him to conduct further aerodynamic tests on the Brunkush-Endless column in order to prove actually that it had a good behavior to wind loading and that it should remain intact also from the structural point of view. So here you can see some pictures taken for the ambiental vibration test. These were led by Professor Taiki Saito, which was a JICA long-time expert in Romania, working on a project related to earthquake engineering, but he generously accepted to travel during the nighttime, actually just before the modules were taken off the column, to conduct these tests. And then Professor Solari further conducted tests in the wind tunnel. And then, as you know, he published many papers and he promoted the column many times, every time he got a chance. So it was based on this friendship that I've got accepted to study with Professor Solari. Years later, when he invited me to his house, like he did with many of his students, he showed me around his office, and then he showed me the book that Professor Lungu actually wrote in 1975 which was, I believe, the second wind engineering that was published at that time. So Professor Solari said that this is the book that I used to study wind engineering. So you can see that the relationship between them was a special kind of relationship, a special friendship. So when I first met Professor Solari, which was actually in January, actually on his birthday, he took me around the university to show me the offices. Then he gave me the keys to one of these offices. And then he introduced me to everybody, to all of the people that he was working with. After we came back to his office, he said, if you have any questions related to wind engineering, you can ask any of the people you've just met. I know the list of all. So I realized then that he was a really humble person and that he did not really like to be praised. So for the next minutes that I still have left, I will not praise Professor Solari, but I will tell some stories about him because he really liked telling stories. Years later, 6 months later, after I actually finished my research stage with him, I did ask him a question, but it was not related to wind engineering. I asked him, what is the most important thing in your life? And he just looked at me and said without any hesitation, my students. So I was very much surprised by this answer because he was one of the greatest researchers in wind engineering. How can students be the most important thing in his life? But then I realized through my experience with him that he was first of all a professor and then a researcher. So he liked to invest in his students and he was there for them to help them grow in their academic career. When I managed to publish my first paper with him, which was in 2016, so about 4 years after I finished my PhD, a long time, I wrote him an email to thank him for the immense patience he had. And his reply was very simple. He said, I am very happy. This was your dream. He must have published hundreds of papers, but he was happy for one paper that I had published. So I believe that a true professor shares the dreams of his students. When I submitted a proposal for a research grant for which only one project would be financed, he said, the presence of one award available is not so relevant. You can win this. Of course, I did not win the project, but the fact that Professor Solari believed in me, I think it was better than winning any research grant. Finally, after trying for many years to obtain financing to install a wind monitoring system in Romania in order to measure and study thunderstorms, of course, I was not successful. But Professor Solari kindly offered to collaborate in this. And within the context of the Thunder project, he actually financed the acquisition of a monitoring system, which is now functioning in Timiș County in Romania. It is the first time thunderstorms will be measured and studied in our country. So again, sometimes dreams may become reality. I believe this was the goal he had, not only with me, but maybe with many other of his students, to fulfill their dreams. He said students are the most important thing in his life, and I believe him now because of all the stories I have with him. I have many similar stories that I could share together with you. But he did not only help me in my personal academic career, but he also continuously supported the wind engineering community in Romania. Starting from 2016, for his first visit, he was awarded the Doctor Honoris Causa by the Technical University of Civil Engineering in Romania. This was done to acknowledge his immense work on the Brempuș endless column. Because his visit was actually in December, I asked him yet another question. I asked him, what do you do on Christmas Day? I was very curious to know about his personal life. And he said, I serve food for the poor people. And I asked, what do you talk to them about? And then he said, I talk to them about wind engineering. So then I realized why Professor Solari had these wonderful lectures and wonderful presentations in conferences. And you can see everybody smiling whenever he was talking, because he had this ability to explain extremely complicated concepts in very simple terms so that everybody could understand. In 2019, he came back to Romania to support the second National Conference on Wind Engineering, which was organized by the Romanian Association for Wind Engineering. We had established this association 2 years before, also because of his never-ending support and encouragement. In 2017, we actually won the organization of the European African Conference on Wind Engineering, which we hope we are going to be able to have in person in 2022. So I also have here some words from the president of the association, Professor Mihail Yankovic, as well as Professor Alessandro Alda, the vice president of our association, who wanted also to express some words in recognition of what Professor Solari has done for us. So Professor Solari has become indeed a friend of Romania, and he was tireless in supporting us. I remember, and I really want to stress this point out, that during the conference, one of the conference days, he was very nervous because his son was having a very important presentation in Geneva. So he chose to come to Romania instead of going to the presentation of his son. I would like just to acknowledge the sacrifice that the family must have made throughout his entire career. For him to be able to be with us, he had to sacrifice some family time. And I would just like to let the family know that this sacrifice was not done in vain, and we will continue the legacy that he has left us. When he passed away, of course, like many other people, I was very, very sad. By then I read a story about a priest and his disciples. And the disciples asked, what will we do after you are gone? And then the priest answered, we were asking the same question when our fathers were about to go. But by doing God's will and following their advice, they were always with us. So I would just like to say that I feel Professor Solari is always with me because I try to keep his advice. He's never out of my mind. I feel that Professor Solari now is in a good place, and I believe that God has shown him the same kindness and patience he has shown to his students. But as I see from the previous presentation, not only to his students. So once again, I would like to say thank you, Professor Solari, for everything that you have done for me, not only in my academic career, but also in helping me in my personal experiences. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ileana. And now let's go ahead with this contribution. Next contribution is by Professor Valeria Duragnona, Universidad de la República Montevideo. Please.
Hello to everybody. First of all, I would like to thank very much the team of the University of Genoa for letting me say some words about Giovanni and his impact in our lives. Our first interaction started with Giovanni around 2004 when he was the president of the International Association for Wind Engineering. Later on, through a contact made by Professor Chris Baker, our paths crossed again because of our common interest on thunderstorm winds. Then Giovanni visited Uruguay in 2015 and 2016, during 2 weeks each time to deliver courses and seminars. And we also set the basis to start co-directing Andres Denis, a PhD student from Uruguay, who also visited Genoa in 2017 and 2018. Here you can see a picture during the course in 2016 in Uruguay. And here you can see a picture of Easter of 2018 when Giovanni invited Andres to spend this day with his family and to Andres. And as you have many of you say, Giovanni was much more than an excellent scientist and much more than a great teacher, much more than an outstanding and passionate researcher with a huge work capacity. And it didn't matter if you were a young researcher, a student, or a senior colleague. His kindness and respect for the others were always present, together with a generous and collaborative spirit. And this combination of personal qualities are not so easy to find. I was lucky because I could witness all this during different periods of my life, and I'm very thankful for that. I'm very thankful for what Giovanni gave to us. As you have said, Giovanni was an exceptional human being and an example to follow in many aspects. You have some of you have always remarked that it was a delight to attend Giovanni's lectures, where he spread his enthusiasm and passion about what he was teaching. We were really fortunate to having recorded one of the courses he delivered in Uruguay. For preparing this presentation, I was watching part of these videos, and it was like having Giovanni here again. In his memory, I chose short fragments of them to share with you, which I believe capture parts of Giovanni's essence. Here you see a video of the beginning of the course in 2016 in Uruguay.
Morning to everybody. It is my pleasure to be here for my second time and to give a course in Uruguay. Valeria, thank you very much for inviting me again. The course will last 2 weeks. My suggestion is that if anybody has a question for me, please try to make this while I am here. Of course, I can answer to you also when I come back to Italy through Skype meeting, but here is much easier. So if you can follow immediately. The course, I am available in the afternoon. Please ask me, and I am available for explanations in any moment. So it's much better in these 2 weeks but later. It is possible also later, but now it's much better. The course, there is no evidence of such collapses, while I have an infinite series of collapse in low-rise and medium-height building, and every time these effects occur, at least in a great number of situations, some convective analysis, some convective situation, some thunderstorm was present. I believe that it is really time to change because our codes should be completely changed and our relationship with wind has to change in order to include this kind of phenomena into account. But I believe also that to change we need a lot of research, and it is impossible to think that next year we are ready. We need a longer period. I believe that in the range of 10 years, we will be ready for a new generation of code and to take into account this phenomenon. So I close here the course. I thank you very much for your participation. It was my great pleasure to be here, and I hope to meet you again, of course, for the examination, that everything is fine for you, for your career. I wish you great success.
So this is the way we would like to remember Giovanni. Giovanni is and always will be in our hearts. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Valeria Duragnona. And now let me introduce Professor Qing Shang Yang, Chongqing University in China. Please, Professor Yang.
Good afternoon. I'm actually happy to be invited to share my memories of Professor Solari to all of you. As some professors have mentioned that, for me, Professor Solari is a scholar, teacher, and a close friend. For me, maybe it's not a very long time to know him, but I met him in 2012 at the BBA Shanghai. But from that time, about 10 years, we have very close collaboration. I show you some pictures about this in 2013. At the beginning of our collaboration, our 1.1 project is named Base for the Mitigation Wind Induced Disaster Wind Sensitive Infrastructure launch meeting. At that time, Professor Solari was invited to be the guest professor in Beijing Jiao Tong University. At that time, I worked there. In that area, Professor Solari visited Beijing a few times in 2013 and 2014. Actually, in 2013, I also visited Professor Solari, Genoa, and his lab. And it's a very good memory that at that time, Professor Solari invited us to have a wonderful lunch at the harbor and show us to the ceiling paintings and cathedrals and churches. It's a very good memory for me. These are some pictures that he gives a report and presentations in our university. As just now, Professor Hangan also mentioned that he's a great teacher and answer the questions from the students. You will have looked that Professor Solari visited us in 2013 for 2 times, and also 2 times in 2014. Yeah, also some presentations, and my students and group members, all of them very be happy to work with him. Actually, in China, Professor Solari very famous and popular. And I think more than 1,000 students and young scholars joined his presentation. Yes, also I show you a picture that the BBA at Boston 2013. That's my students with Professor Solari and Tamura. Another girl is my daughter. That all my family know Professor Solari very well, and all of us love him much. Yeah, in 2016 we have International Structural Engineering Symposium. Also, Professor Solari gave a keynote. In 2017, I moved to Chongqing, and Professor Solari at that time also visited here and gave lecture to us. This also he visited here in 2016. This is a long time we made offer at in the 15th International Conference on Engineering, September in 2019 in Beijing. It's really sorry that the last time for us to meet each other face by face. Actually, Professor Solari also gave a great contribution to the community of wind engineering of China. He started our collaboration when he recognized that in China as one of the founding member of International Association of Wind Engineering. He also gave a lot of help to Chinese group to be member of the International Association of Wind Engineering. After the Bureau of Foreigner Experts of China Central Government knows the news that Professor Solari has passed away, they also sent an official letter to the Genoa University to appreciate Professor Solari's help to China with the engineering communication. Yeah, I want to say Professor Solari will always be on our mind and our heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Yang. And now the last speaker in this session is Dr. Zhang Shi, Beijing University of Civil Engineering and Architecture in Beijing. Please, Zhang Shi.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Zhang Shi, a postdoctor from Beijing University of Civil Engineering and Architecture. Professor Solari was my PhD supervisor. It is my great honor to be invited to share some moments of Professor Solari when he was happy with me, especially in China. I met Professor Solari in January 2014 in Beijing when I was an undergraduate student. He was invited to Beijing Jiaotong University by Professor Qingshan Yang to give some lectures. And I was in charge of arranging his schedule. Through this opportunity, I got acquainted with this wonderful and lovely supervisor. I accompanied him to eat dinner and felt the atmosphere of Chinese New Year of the house. It was the first time that he came to Beijing in winter, and he said it was also the last time because the winter of Beijing was so cold for him. And then I became a doctoral student of Professor Yang after graduation and had more chances to listen to the lectures of Professor Solari and accompany him to try some typical Chinese food and experience the beautiful and crowded scenic spots in Beijing. And then, thanks to the support of Professor Yang and Professor Solari, I became a co-tutoring PhD student of them and had the chance to go to Genoa for another PhD degree. At the first day when I arrived at University of Genoa, Professor Solari introduced the wind tunnel and some models for me in detail. And then he invited me to his home for eating dinner with his family. He was the chef that night. And please trust me, he's not only the professor in wind engineering, but also the expert in heating the semi-finished products from supermarket. And he always invited me to celebrate every important festival with his family, like the Easter in 2016. Actually, this is also the first time I was aboard. He gave me a lot of help and warmth, let me feel just like home. And this is the first time I attended the international conference and gave a presentation. I was very nervous. Well, luckily, Professor Solari was the chair of my section and also stayed on the stage, which gave me a lot of courage. And there are many good memories in Belgium. As you can see, during the time I was in Genoa, he taught me not only the knowledge, but also how to drink the Italian wine. Then he visited Beijing in October in 2017 as usual and taught knowledge to new graduate students. I introduced the downburst simulator in Beijing Jiaotong University and the meteorological tower in Beijing for him. Then we went to Chongqing by airplane together for the forum. He tried the hot pot there and loved it very much. In 2018, we attended 2 conferences in Korea and in Chongqing together. Then he came to Beijing for the International Conference of Wind Engineering. He was so kind and responsible that he always listened to my presentation and pointed out my shortcoming immediately. We ate his favorite Chinese food, Beijing roast duck, together and visited the expo. Finally, in 2020, due to the coronavirus, my PhD thesis was online. There are almost no hair for him due to the chemotherapy. I was very impressed and really appreciate that he could attend it. And this is the last time we met each other, and no one knows that goodbye is forever. I promised to him that even I graduated, I would like to pick him up at the airport and treat him to his favorite Peking roast duck every time when he came to Beijing. Well, he left us and broke our agreement first. I know there is no chance to see him walk out from the exit again. Well, he must have been watching us from the heaven. He said I would always in his heart. For him, I will always be. He will always be alive in my mind and inspire me to strive to become a good teacher in the future. Finally, I want to share a short video that he presented his blessing on my wedding. I think these sentences must also be what he wants to say to all the people who are in memory of him.
I want to wish you all the best and life full of love, serenity, health.
Okay, thanks, Professor Giovanni Solari, and hope there is no pain in the heaven.
I want to wish you.
Thank you, Dr. Ganshi. And before closing the session, I like to leave the floor again to Professor Duragnona. She wants to show you a video. Please.
Okay. Hi, thank you. I don't know what happened that you didn't see some parts of this. So this is a picture. No. I have some problem here. Sorry. Do you see something?
No, unfortunately. Oh, yes, okay.
Yes?
Yeah, your PC.
Okay.
Your desktop, yes.
Well, do you see this? A picture in a classroom?
Yes.
Okay. Well, This was a picture taken during a course Giovanni delivered in Uruguay in 2016. And here is a picture during Andres Dennis' stay in Genoa during Easter, when he invited Andres to spend Easter with him and his family. And we recorded a course he gave in Uruguay in 2016. And I wanted to share some fragments of it because I think they show part of Giovanni's essence, as several of you had said. So this is part of the beginning of the course of 2016.
Good morning to everybody. It is my pleasure to be here for my second time and to give a course in Uruguay. Valeria, thank you very much for inviting me again. The course will last 2 weeks. My suggestion is that if anybody has a question for me, please try to make this while I am here. Of course, I can answer to you also when I come back Italy through Skype meeting, but here is much easier. So if you can follow immediately the course, I am available in the afternoon. Please ask me, and I am available for explanations in any moment. So it's much better in these 2 weeks, but later. It is possible also later, but now it's much better.
And here you can see the closing of the course when he shows his happiness for studying thunderstorms and what he was expecting in this topic. And also you can see how he was interacting with the students.
There is no evidence of such collapses, while I have an infinite series of collapse in low-rise and medium-height building. And every time these effects occur, at least in a great number of situations, some convective analysis, some convective situation, some thunderstorm was present. I believe that it is really time to change because our codes should be completely changed and our relationship with wind has to change in order to include this kind of phenomena into account. But I believe also that to change, we need a lot of research, and it is impossible to think that next year we are ready. We need a longer period. I believe that in the range of 10 years, we will be ready for a new generation of code and to take into account this phenomenon. So I close here the course. I thank you very much for your participation. It was my great pleasure to be here. And I hope to meet you again, of course, for the examination, that everything is fine for you, for your career. I wish you great success.
So I was saying that this is the way we would like to remember Giovanni. And Giovanni is already and always will be in our hearts. So thank you very much again.
Thank you, Professor Duragnona. And now I leave the floor to Federica Tubino that will present the next session.
Thank you, Carlotta, and good afternoon, everybody. In the next session, we have 6 memories from some friends of Giovanni belonging to the professional world. So the first memory is by Stefano Camelli, who is technical director at WSP in London and one of Giovanni's former students. So thank you, Stefano. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Federica. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
That's good. All right.
Not in full presentation mode. Not in full. But okay. Now it's okay. Thank you.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for inviting me here today to say a few words about Professor Giovanni Solari. I first met Professor Solari in 1999 at the University of Genoa when I was a student, and I was attending the course of structural dynamics. It was delivered that year. Those were the days of slate blackboards and overhead projectors. I still have photocopies of all the slides from that course. His handwriting was incredibly clean and neat, and the passion he had in delivering his lectures was clearly visible and second to none. He was in fact no surprise that many of the students, myself included, who attended the structural dynamics course that year, also attended his very first course of wind engineering in the year 2000. His great knowledge and understanding of the field came through so awe-inspiring during his lectures. What captivated me as a student back then were his teaching skills. He was a dynamic and charismatic communicator. Rarely have I come across professors or researchers who, when at the top of their field, still had this passion for teaching and knowledge sharing. I was fortunate enough to be able to remain in the field of wind engineering right from the start of my working career, and despite being physically distant from my beloved Liguria, I was able to keep in touch with Professor Solari throughout the best part of 20 years. I still remember when, during my early days at BMT Fluid Mechanics, while in transit through London, he came to Teddington to pay us a visit. He was very interested in the various projects we were testing in the different wind tunnels and asked us a lot of questions. Despite being one of the foremost experts in the field of wind engineering, he still had a curious mind and was constantly eager to learn and discover new things. During that visit, I recall he also spent a good couple of hours searching through the historical archives of the aerodynamic division of the National Physical Laboratory. I perhaps did not fully appreciate it back then, but looking at it now, one could certainly see that his interest in this field was already going beyond its pure mathematical engineering aspects. The historical aspects of this science were also very important to him. In fact, the news of the closure of those wind tunnels at the end of 2018 deeply saddened him. We obviously met at various scientific conferences around the world throughout the years, but there is one in particular that I like remembering. That is the 10th International Conference on Structural Dynamics, which was held in Rome in September 2017. Professor Solari was awarded the ERC Advanced Grant the year before for the Project Thunder. Between some of the various multi-track sessions of the conference, we managed to squeeze some time in the shade of the beautiful cloister of the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering of La Sapienza, discussing how vast the possibilities in the research of non-stationary winds were, not only from an engineering standpoint, but also from a risk reduction and loss prevention perspective. This remains one of my fondest memories of him. Last time I saw Professor Solari, it was in January 2020. I flew to Genoa to supervise a test being carried out in the wind tunnel of the university. I called him as soon as I landed, and we met in the afternoon of the following day in his apartment together with my friend and ex-colleague Anna Bagnara. It was a poignant afternoon. We briefly talked about this adverse medical condition, but soon after, we also started talking about wind engineering. The status of the field in the industry, the status of the Project Thunder, and his career. He also showed us his 2006 Jack Cermak medal, his 2011 Alan Davenport medal, and his 2017 Robin Scanlon medal, awards he was particularly pleased with. We were very honored and we could share with him some of his proudest memories that afternoon. Unfortunately, I do not have many photos with Professor Solari, but amongst the few I have, I decided to share this one with you today. It was taken in Naples in September 2018, towards the end of the dinner of the 15th conference of the Italian Association for Wind Engineering. I like this photo because it illustrates very well the huge legacy Professor Solari has left behind. PhD students, researchers, colleagues, professionals, and of course friends from around the world, all sharing that very special passion he inspired in us for this field we now call wind science and engineering. Grazie mille, Gianni. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefano. And now I introduce the next speaker. It is Paolo Cremonini, Vice President, Strategic Development at Fagioli, Italy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Federica. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to thank the Scuola Politecnica of Genoa, first of all, for the organization of this event, to remember all together a great man and a dear friend, and of course for the possibility to share my feeling. Actually, the family name of Professor Solari was yet, to me, a predestination. His genuine and sunny personality allowed him to be a true lighthouse for everybody he met, even at first sight. Really, he was an illuminated and illuminating person at the same time, in every field, in any moment of his life. From the professional point of view, we all know that Giovanni has been the top authority in the world on structural and wind engineering. His endless competence and knowledge on dynamics and wind effect on structure was based on the study of scientific texts, but mainly was based on continuous research, thanks to his intuition, to his vision, since when he was a young student. Gianni has been able to understand and describe natural phenomena unknown till that moment, and to define tools to know and manage them, to keep them under control. His success and awards are really uncountable. They have and they will have a huge consequence on everybody's life in terms of health and safety. Very well known in the academic and engineering fields, but unfortunately not as it should be by normal people, which can live safe thanks to Gianni research. Gianni was not only a scientist, a great professor. He was a loving husband and daddy. I do remember very well his care and attention to the family, to his beloved sons. Years ago, we used to meet each other outside the secondary school attended by his sons and my daughters. And there were occasions to talk about them and their future, about joys and anxieties that children by nature give to their parents. Actually, I had the great fortune to know Gianni and share our journey in different phases of our life. When I was a young student in the Istituto di Scienze Tecniche delle Costruzioni di Genova. He was a young professor, but at the same time a clear compass already for all students and professors too. Then again as a student during my master in steel construction in Semi University. As father of my daughter Giulia, who was led by him through her studies till the graduation in civil engineer. And then as colleagues on important projects, like for instance the communication tower in Milan. As speakers at same conferences and workshops, and as guest speaker at his courses to share with his students my work and life experience. 1 year ago, exactly 1 year ago, he called me in a sunny, boring afternoon in the deep middle of the lockdown. I was home, disoriented as the majority of us by the pandemic. He asked me whether he was disturbing me and whether he could talk to me. He asked me this, you understand? A scientist, famous in the world, was asking me whether he was disturbing me and I could talk with him. Unbelievable. Again, his kindness and care was really unique. Actually, he wanted to propose to me to join the General Council of Italian Welding Institute. I remained almost speechless because of his proposal. The only thing I was able to say was, in short, thanks, Gianni. Let me think that I call you back. Of course, I had no doubt. I was only literally shocked and too honored at the same time to be able to talk. Obviously, the day after, I called him immediately to thanks and accept his proposal with joy. Again and again, it was a rainbow in gray period, gently and softly. His light has illuminated a person's life, and as he did for the majority of us. The leitmotif of human and professional life of Gianni was a combination of simplicity, serenity, positivity, kindness, and care of others, which allowed him to be a real unique man and which represent the heritage he left us. And everybody who had the chance to share with him his life path, no matter how long, is a very lucky person. I still remember the motto we chose for a ceremony we organized together about wind action and effects. You cannot see the wind, but also the trees bow their heads as it passes. Gianni, I miss you so much, no idea how much. After my father, you are really my reference point, my compass forever. Thanks, Gianni.
Thank you for this memory. And now the next memory is by Michele Lanza, Technical Director at the Italian Institute of Welding Group in Genoa. Thank you, Michele Lanza. The floor is yours.
Thank you to you. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I've been working in Italian Institute of Welding for many years, and I'm very happy to have been included among Professor Solari friends. I had known him for a long time, and I had the opportunity to collaborate with him and with his colleague in University of Genoa. But only a few years ago, we became familiar. I'd received from him a demonstration of esteem that had surprised me, given the level of his position. Of course, I was very proud of this. And when in 2017 he joined the steering committee of the Italian Institute of Welding, I was instructed by my management to propose him the position of president of our institute just in the autumn of 2018. He was surprised and almost embarrassed. At the time, I thought that the professor didn't quite know how to refuse without offending us. He already had the many prestigious position. There were some other occasion of meeting and dialogue, and then it became clear to me that the professor's embarrassment was linked to his great rigor as a professional and above as a man, because every assignment that Giovanni took on, wanted to carry out well, dedicating the necessary time, and perhaps in our case, he was afraid of not having it. I tried to explain the rule and cheer up, and in the end, he accepted. He was happy and proud. Also for this reason, the death of our president, Professor Giovanni Solari, is an irrecoverable loss. He, as the future president in 2019, gave a conference at the 10th edition of the National Welding Days in Genoa, our main convention. The 1,500 about participants were fascinated by the passionate presentation on the action of the wind on the structure. As president, Giovanni dedicated himself to the enhancement of the IIS mission with a surprising spirit for a man accustomed to all kinds of international success and with admirable dedication. A spirit and an enthusiasm with which he has dragged and guided generations of students. So I, my colleague, all the Institute, we will roll up our sleeves to honor who have certainly strengthened us in a so short time. Just remember, after his disappearance, I received a thought from his son Davide. He told me that his father had accepted the position also in memory of his grandfather, who had always wished for the professor a commitment to work even outside the prestigious academic sphere. Thus, the professor joy was also linked to the memory of his father. I think really that it is the most beautiful thing that could be referred to me. Let's all remember him as an extraordinary professor and scientist, but also as a very, very good person. I have nothing to add to my very, very short presentation, but I think that these few words are sufficient to explain our thought, our grateful, our memory for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Michele Lanza, for your memory. And now it is a pleasure to introduce Pierangelo Pistoletti, Chief Executive at Seteco Engineering and also Adjunct Professor of Bridges at the University of Genoa. So please, Pierangelo.
Good afternoon to everybody. Speaking about Giovanni Solari, for me is really emotional, because it means to speak about a lost, very good and dear friend. I met Giovanni in the second part of the 90s. Quite strange because it was a convivial occasion, a dinner organized by Lions Club in Genoa, where I had just moved to with my family and my engineering bureau. After dinner, Giovanni made a conference speaking about the importance of the wind on the structures. The matter was technical, more suitable for a scientific workshop than for a convivial occasion. I have been really impressed by his mastery of the matter, his passion, and his own capacity to be easily understood even by common people, absolutely not expert of the matter. Nevertheless, everybody has been completely fascinated. Fortunately, in the following times, we had many opportunities for professional reasons. I was a bridge and big structures designer, and Giovanni was a wind engineer. We had a lot of common arguments. We were living in the same town. It was very easy to meet again. These opportunities allowed our reciprocal respect and estimation to grow up. And very early, we became not only professional colleagues, we became really good friends. We shared a lot of professional opportunities. For example, some of the main bridges and big structures I designed have been studied by Giovanni in the wind tunnel we have in Genoa. Many times I took advantage of his advice. In particular, I have the pride and the honor to have been involved by Giovanni as professor at the University of Genoa for the course of study bridge building since 2001. Involved as member of CNR DT 207, Guide of the Assessment of Wind Actions and Effects on Structures by National Research Council of Italy. Giovanni was the president of the committee where I represented the designer point of view. Finally, involved as member of the managing committee of the Italian Institute of Welding, which Giovanni was the president of. All above is the real sign of our reciprocal estimation and respect. By means of all these opportunities, I have had the possibility to know Giovanni deeply, and what I appreciated very much was his frankness, distinctions, humanity, and ease of relationship. I like to remember Giovanni, beyond his scientific mastery that is very much appreciated and recognized all over the world, as the good friend he was able to be, and as the great man he really was. Thanks to everybody for this opportunity to remember my dear friend Giovanni Solari.
I thank Pierangelo Pistoletti for his memory. And now the next speaker is Rossana Varna, executive at the Ports of Genoa. So please, Rossana, the floor is yours.
Dear all, I am very, very excited to be here. I would like to thank you for being all together to honor the memory of our friend Giovanni. Giovanni, you are surely smiling while hearing me speaking in English. As you know, this isn't my strong point. I really had in mind to give up because of the language, but I am trying for you. Giovanni, don't laugh and try to forgive my imperfection. Please. I don't think I would have done it for anyone else. Many people here could give a contribution, bringing memories related to the scientific world and to the great job that Giovanni and his colleagues have carried on over the years. As far as I'm concerned, I prefer to remain on the man Giovanni. And I try to explain what Giovanni is for me. I am using intentionally the present tense. We met by chance while working on a project about the wind. And I met also those I called his colleagues, but who actually were part of his big academic family, young professors who have worked with him, sharing his great passion. To me, Giovanni is a close friend, before being one of the greatest worldwide experts on wind engineering. Giovanni was a man who never lost his simplicity in human relationship, as well as he was recognized for his undeniable brilliance. With his peaceful smile, empathy, and good heart, he has always able to listen and say the right words. Some years ago, I went through a very difficult period for personal reasons. I trusted him, and he was able to listen me and advise me. We have often talked about our lives, sorrows and joys, children, failures, wishes, and life choices, and so on. Even today, I needed to talk to the man and the father he was, because life is never simple, and when we face problems, it's priceless to know that there was so valuable person who respect and in whom you can trust. Our lives were totally dedicated to our jobs, and this was another common point. We planned to have a lunch together, but months flew away, and unfortunately, we postponed it too much. Now I feel a deep sorrow. But anyway, what he transmitted to me remains inside me. And I do believe it's the most important thing, to be yourself, to be true to yourself. Reputation, power, success didn't change his way to deal with people. He always was a truly kind, generous, and a simple person. When Giovanni says that the wind is a dualism between God and evil, I feel excitated because such sentences could only come out from the heart of a very sensitive man. A man whose love for the wind was so deep to see inside it exactly the coexistence of God and evil, so different ancestral forces. I cannot here forget, among many others, the award which most did matter to him, Thunder. This is a prestigious, advanced grant project of European Research Council. You got it, dear Giovanni, thanks to your effort and determination. You informed me immediately, talking with deep excitement and pride. Then you passed away too early, because we had still so many things to tell each other. And I had to tell you about my challenges that you know. I did it, Giovanni. The most important one, with my son, and the other reached the last 3rd of February. You cannot imagine how much I'm sorry for not having been able to share these successes with you. For them, for a long time, I was so much under stress, but you gave me a strong support. I would like to finish remembering the day we said you goodbye for the last time. I was at home because of COVID restriction. I was working. The daylight was bright and the weather was very windy. I live in front of the sea. The sunlight and that strong, gusty wind hugged me. I remember it was a very strong and sweet wind at the same time. I had the feeling that you were greeting all of us through what you loved all along your life, the wind. I must confess that I cried for a long time. But in my eyes, I had your quiet smile. I felt the heritage you left us, your great family, boys and girls, men and women, friends, academics, and researchers. It's a treasure, and no one will ever take it from us. And so the sorrow for your loss is mitigated by all the persons all around the world who keep you in their hearts. If each of them had now a small light to switch on, I believe that the world would be less dark. I miss you, Giovanni.
Thank you, Rossana, for your nice talk. And now the last speaker of this session is Alberto Vintani, who is the founding partner at BCV Design in Milan. Probably we have some technical problems. Okay, we have some technical problems, so maybe we can move to the, no, we wait just one more second. Ok.
Sorry, ho avuto dei problemi con la connessione. Posso parlare?
Okay, here we are. You can start. The floor is yours. Okay.
Thank you very much. Sorry for the inconvenience. Good afternoon. The invitation of the professor of the University of Genoa Research Group to participate with a speech in memory of the late Professor Giovanni allows me the opportunity to express my heartfelt and the most profound thanks for the friendship and his help in 35 years of collaboration. collaboration. Thanks for the empathy he immediately established right from the very start. Thanks for the simplicity and the profound correctness and technical concreteness of the answer provided to address even the most complicated issue. Thanks for the opportunity he gave me to learn and own my knowledge about the effects of the action on the wind on structure. I had the chance to meet him in Milan in the 80s as he established a scientific and technical collaboration with Giulio Vaglia, another friend of life, immediately giving me access to an invaluable resource for all issues relating to the action of the wind on destruction, and also establishing a true personal friendship. There were several design themes for which I and other colleagues of my consulting engineering practice sought his precious collaboration. In April 2005, for the drafting of the initial test of the CNR DT 207/2008, and in June 2014 for the revision and updating after 10 years, it was a great honor for me to receive Giovanni's request to participate in a study group on wind action on construction, with the task of rereading the test critically in its different evolutionary phases, giving an opinion on technical and executive aspects. This experience was at the same time completely unforgettable and priceless. With this work strongly supported, guided, and wished by Giovanni, all operators in the construction sector now have a tool at their disposal to identify not only the action, but also the issues related to the interaction between the wind and the structure, until today substantially ignored or undervalued in most cases. Thanks, Giovanni, for leaving us such important legacy. One last memory. In early August 2019, I turned to Giovanni to share my doubts and get advice on how to proceed. Under a copy of a former Cork depot with a curvilinear profile built by the Eiffel Studio in the early 1900s, the insertion of this structure with movable frame was planned in order to create a conference room. After so many questions on an unusual topic, he replied, "Dear Alberto, obviously you never inquired about a nice little house with a square plan and flat roof. The problem, as you have indeed found out, is not an easy one to solve." Immediately after, he suggests a series of possible methods of investigation of the phenomenon, which indicated his endless curiosity in exploring this phenomena and the desire to find a practical solution to the problem. As the bottom, he added a structural observation deduced from a simply architectural rendering. What was all the bottom part of truss out of plan? Was Giovanni, a priceless researcher and a true engineer. Shortly thereafter, he fell ill, and I lost a consultant and a friend for life. Thanks for everything, Giovanni.
I thank Alberto Vintani for this memory, and also thank all the speakers of this session. And now I leave the floor to Maria Pia Repetto, who will introduce the next group of speakers. So thank you.
Thank you, Federica, and good afternoon, everybody. I introduce the last group of speakers from Italian Academy. And the first speaker is Professor Giulio Baglio from Politecnico di Milano. Good afternoon, Professor Baglio, please. The floor is yours. I cannot hear you, sorry. Perhaps your microphone is... I cannot hear. No. Someone can help us? Okay. I would like to ask next speaker while Professor Baglio is solving some problem with the microphone. Next speaker is the Professor Guido Buresti, full professor of fluid dynamics at University of Pisa. Thank you, Guido.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity of saying a few words in this memory event. I don't remember exactly when I first met Giovanni, but it was around, or say at least 35 years ago. We used to meet at congresses or committee meetings, or we just talked on the phone, but certainly less than what we would have liked. However, the reason why his passing touched me so much is certainly not the length of time we have known each other, and not even our profound mutual esteem from a professional point of view. Rather, I think that it was our deep affinity, which was evident to us from the very beginning of our acquaintance. And this is why our relationship grew to become a true friendship of those that do not happen so frequently in a lifetime. Obviously, I admired him for his professional competence, and it was clear to me that he was a cut above most, not only for intellectual skills, but also for his ability to take responsibilities, to create a splendid working group, and to be able to involve them in his enthusiasm and love for science and research. But I think that between us, the point was that we understood each other on the fly, and we knew perfectly that even if we did not agree on something, we would not only respect the opinion of the other, but we would consider it carefully, knowing that between us there could never be ulterior motives or unspoken issues. It is still difficult for me to realize that we no longer hear his phone calls, to share his happiness for certain funds he had obtained and which allowed him to carry out his research, and to give an opportunity for professional growth to his collaborators, in particular to the younger ones. After my retirement, he asked me to cooperate with him on his research program financed by the European Council. And this was for me an incredible pleasure, I would say a real gift. Indeed, in all the past years, he often called me to know my opinion on certain problems of black body aerodynamics. But this was the first time in which we could work together officially. Now, I also would like to share with you some, sorry, just a moment. Okay. So the first of these occasions refers to many years ago, in particular to the work of the Committee for the Consolidation and Restoration of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. At that time, you know, Giovanni was appointed as responsible for the wind risk analysis of the tower. And he was kind enough to involve me in this activity, in particular in the choice of the wind tunnel, where to carry out the tests on the tower model, and also in the supervision of the tests themselves. We chose the wind tunnel of the Danish Maritime Institute, and you can see here the tower inside the wind tunnel with all its surroundings, which were perfectly reproduced, and even the the orientation was changed in order to have different orientations of the wind. It was a very nice time we had together. And in that occasion, we were invited to have dinner in a very nice seaside outdoor restaurant. It was midsummer evening, so we could enjoy good food and an endless sunset. And now you can see here a memory photo we took. Obviously, we were much younger, and you can see him with his fantastic black mustache. Here you see another dinner, a dinner a few years later, one of the dinners of the Congress of the Italian Association of Wind Engineering, of which at that time Giovanni was the president. Obviously, it was a more formal dinner, but after a few glasses of wine, perhaps a little less formal. And this is a much more recent photo, which refers to a few days I spent in Genoa for some lectures. Again, we are on our way to have dinner in a very nice place. Indeed, I must confess that we love to have dinner together, and it took me to several good and pleasant restaurants in Genoa. But finally, this is how I would like to remember him, with the sunset light over Bocca d'Assa. I do miss him very much. He was, for me, a very special person. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Guido, and thank you for your words. And we go on and we try again, presenting Professor Giulio Baglio. Professor Baglio? Okay, let we try again, please. Oh, I cannot hear again, I'm sorry.
Professore, provi un attimo a andare nelle impostazioni del camera mic sotto. C'è un tasto con una rotellina con scritto camera mic. E dovrebbe visualizzare le impostazioni e scegliere il microfono giusto. Non capiamo. Succede. Sono imprevisti tecnici. Non la sentiamo. Vediamo che muove le labbra. Allora facciamo così un attimo. Facciamo andare i prossimi e ci ricolleghiamo nella stanza.
Okay, thank you, Laura, and we go on with our program, and I introduce now two speakers from Politecnico di Milano, Professor Giorgio Diana and Professor Alberto Zasso. They are past directors of Wind Tunnel in Politecnico di Milano. Welcome, and please, Professor Diana.
Okay, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon to everybody. First of all, I am missing very much Giovanni. We had the opportunity to meet a lot of time, not only for the research activity we have together, but also because Giovanni's summer house is very close to the harbor where I take my boat. So we could meet also for a pleasant dinner or to meet common friends. Giulio Baglio will speak, I hope, on the contribution Giovanni brought to the Messina Bridge. I was at the designer side, and I remember the very exciting discussion we had together. We did an important work together for the Italian railways related to wind effect risk analysis for high-velocity train. Giovanni made a very interesting work to define the probability that the wind blowing across the train can produce the train overturning. This study was performed for all the Italian high-velocity railway line. As an output of this work, In the most critical zone of the line, anemometers are placed, and when the wind reaches a limit value, an input is given to the train control to automatically reduce the train speed. And what about conferences we participated to? Organized together, prize commission, and prize giving ceremonies. A long research activity is still ending too early for Giovanni. Ciao, Giovanni.
Thank you, Professor Diana. And please, Alberto.
Good afternoon to all, dear colleagues. It is very sad, and at the same time, it is very nice to meet together in memory of Giovanni Solari. I like to remember the spirit of selfless collaboration and friendship that linked Giovanni for more than 30 years to the wind engineering group in Milano. And I like to remember, as many have already done, the extraordinary enthusiasm Giovanni had in the most disparate wind engineering scientific teams and initiatives that linked Polimi and University of Genoa in the recent years. I quote the master in wind engineering in 2003, a happy and very stimulating experience in which Giovanni got involved in first person with his irreducible generosity. And with equal enthusiasm and generosity, Giovanni was then responsible for defining the Milano design wind in the first City Life project, the beginning of the high-rise buildings development in Milano, an extraordinary Polimi, University of Genova, collaboration experience. And I like to close with a very personal memory. It was at the end of the lockdown, early June of last year, an unexpected phone call from Giovanni, and his always serene voice, reassuring, and I dare to say, smiling. We talked about the new bridge of Genoa, an interesting collaborative wind engineering project. A beautiful memory, light speeches by wind engineers on a theme of common passion, and a confirmation of an open, affectionate friendship. We are missing you, Giovanni.
Thank you, Alberto, and thank you, Giorgio. And we go on with a group of friends and colleagues from structural mechanics sector. So I present Professor Antonella Pirrotta and Professor Mario Di Paola from University of Palermo, and Professor Giuseppe Muscolino from University of Messina. Hello, please, Mario.
Thank you for inviting me. I am deeply touched for this commemoration of the late of my bosom friend Giovanni. I think that during this commemoration, many people under different perspectives will give contribution on the unbelievable scientific quality of Professor Solari, assessed prizes, honors, and production of excellent papers by Solari and his school. I will confine myself on my deep knowledge of Giovanni as a man and as a good friend. I met Giovanni 40 years ago in a conference in Genoa. He was 6 years younger than me, a contemporary of Giuseppe Muscolino that was a researcher working with me. Giovanni made a presentation on wind action and response of tall structures by using the theory of stochastic processes. Muscolino and me appreciate him and because he made a very excellent presentation. So at the end of the session, we contact him, and immediately the feeling between us so evident that he proposed to abandon the banquet of the conference, and he proposed to go in a restaurant in Nervi to taste the fish qualities and the speciality of Ligurian kitchen. He offered the dinner and he tried us to the hotel. Unfortunately, it rains cats and dogs. The weather condition become dramatic and this car go in the sidewalk and 2 tires burst. We changed one, a guy with an identical car stopped and give us the second one. The rain don't stop and Muscolino waded into a telephone box calling her wife. Giovanni and me changed the second tire and at least we restart Giovanni instead of to fly into passion, laughed till he cried. For Giovanni, Muscolini and me remain one of the best collection of our life. After the conference, we remain in touch. I go in Genoa to make lesson for PhD. I invited him to make a conference in Palermo and our friendship increased. He invited me to belong to the scientific community of the Italian Association of Wind, together with Diana, Giorgio, Diana, and other people. So we have many other opportunities of discussion about stochastic processes in both theoretical and engineeristic aspect. In this occasion, he became a boson friend, and we communicate also our private aspect of our life. 35 years ago, when Professor Spanos spent 1 month in Palermo as visiting professor, he asked my opinion about the new professor in Italy involved in stochastic dynamics. My answer was, for me, the best is Giovanni Solari. He lives in Genoa. He's a young, full professor that is very clever, very good friend, and an interesting person. Immediately, Spanos proposed me to go in Genoa for 2 days, and we go. When we come back in Palermo, Spanos said to me, you was right, Giovanni is an high quality guy from both research and human point of view. My last contact with him was some days before he passed away, when the Eurodin Committee prize finished the assignment of the hours. A good friend immediately communicated that among some other, the winner was Solari, Spanos, and Pirrotta. So I called the family, and the son of Giovanni said that his father cannot speak, but Giovanni once realized that I was in the telephone, want to speak with me, and I communicated that the career prizes were assigned to him. I think that in the dramatic situation, he had a little while of happiness for the prize, and I feel that he was also happy for hearing me. After a few days, he passed away. In my point of view, Giovanni was humble of heart, a very eminent scientist. He was a formidable engineer. He was generous, he was loyal, he was a gentleman. He never boasts of being an eminent scientist. I think that all this quality are recognized by any people meeting him. His lost is for me a dramatic event, and I think that this is a dramatic event for all the scientific community too. Ciao Giovanni, amico mio.
Thank you very much, Mario, and please, Professor Pirrotta.
Thank you everybody for inviting me. And dear all, I met Professor Solari when I was a student, and I was astonished by his charismatic presence and his deep knowledge. I was calling him, never to his face, only in my thoughts. I was calling him the wind giant professor. And he helped me so much in my career with the suggestions and introducing me in high-level committee. But the thing I strongly feel and felt at that time, that was all the time I was talking to him. I was wondering, how come a giant makes dwarfs like me feel important? Never answered. Thank you, Professor Solari. Thank you, Giovanni, my wind giant. Giovanni. Mario Di Paola. Pippo Muscolino, and myself, we miss you so much. Ciao.
Thank you very much to our friends, and let's go on with the next speaker. I introduce Professor Franco Maceri, Professor of Structural Mechanics at the University of Rome Tor Vergata and President of a Committee for Technical Standards of National Research Council. Please, Prof. Maceri.
Thank you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I will ask for the privilege to speak in Italian because I'm maybe the last one.
Yes, please.
È stato per me un grande privilegio avere godere dell'amicizia e della collaborazione di un uomo così ricco di mente e di cuore come Giovanni Solari. Gianni. Ci siamo frequentati per più di quasi 20 anni, dal 2002, nel comitato che ha citato poco fa il nostro chairman, che ha un nome complesso, è la commissione di studio del CNR per la predisposizione e l'analisi delle norme tecniche relative alle costruzioni. Predisposizione e analisi, cioè non l'attività normativa vera e propria che spetta ad altri enti, ma un lancio verso il futuro, vedere che cosa si può trasferire dalla ricerca scientifica all'ingegneria con regole certe e con modi di operare. Poi dirò perché è importante che Gianni si è occupato di questa cosa, ma prima di tutto vorrei ricordare le riunioni, le discussioni, anche dopo lavoro, quando a pranzo discutevamo appassionatamente dei contenuti di vita accademica e di vita, nelle quali ho compreso bene che Giovanni era un vero scienziato. Lo dice molto bene il titolo del suo libro, Wind Science and Engineering. Lui è un uomo di scienza che faceva ingegneria. Quindi partiva, per così dire, dai pilastri galileiani. La sua passione era la galleria del vento, le sensate esperienze, però aggiungeva le certe dimostrazioni, la sua passione per la meccanica computazionale, che sono le certe dimostrazioni di oggi. E non dimenticava mai di essere ingegnere, perché usava la scienza per l'ingegneria. E questo oggi è diventato purtroppo un fatto raro, ma come scienziato aveva queste capacità che mostrava anche come insegnante. Questa capacità di unire il rigore e la precisione allo sguardo verso l'applicazione gli dava attrattività, fascino verso gli studenti e fascino anche per coloro che avevano il privilegio di ascoltare le sue conferenze, che erano sempre limpide e profonde. Devo dire che dal punto di vista, se mi si consente il termine letterario, c'è poco della letteratura che sedimentata nel Novecento che brilli ancora alla luce del XXI secolo. E tra queste certamente ci sono le opere di Giovanni Solari, anche per la sua capacità, che è proprio dello scienziato vero, della limpidezza e del rifugire sempre dall'eccesso di complicazioni. Non ho mai visto Gianni complicare una cosa per il puro gusto di farlo. Ricordo un altro grande, che era un matematico, Francesco Giacomo Tricomi, che si vantava alla fine della sua vita di non avere mai reso difficile una cosa che poteva essere fatta in maniera semplice. L'eleganza nella trattazione è un segno distintivo dello scienziato. Devo dire che mentre molti colleghi si dedicavano alla normativa, che è certamente un fondamento del progresso scientifico e tecnologico, semplicemente come parte della loro attività, Gianni lo faceva per profonda convinzione. È lo stesso discorso che facevo prima, l'idea che uno scienziato che insegna in una scuola di ingegneria deve fare le applicazioni, e per fare le applicazioni bisogna che questa capacità venga trasferita, e il trasferimento si fa scrivendo un'opera che sia completa, in cui siano chiari i problemi, chiari i principi e i metodi per risolvere i problemi, chiari il come si applica e nei vari casi. Quel documento che lui ha così brillantemente impostato e redatto, stiamo parlando del 2008, e che è stato presentato in varie parti d'Italia. Io stesso venni a Genoa alla presentazione che lui volle fare alla sua scuola. Ha avuto un successo straordinario. Nell'edizione italiana ha avuto circa 200.000 accessi sul sito CNR, un successo editoriale da rotocalco, non più che da libro scientifico. È stato tradotto in inglese, è stato diffuso in tutto il mondo da Gianni stesso, che ha reso un grande servizio all'ingegneria strutturale italiana, perché ha portato dappertutto i risultati e le capacità che noi abbiamo, che sotto la sua spinta sviluppato qui da noi. Nel 2018-2019 abbiamo fatto la seconda edizione, l'aggiornamento, negli ultimi suoi giorni era in corso la traduzione in lingua inglese. Era uno dei motivi per i quali gli ho parlato fin quasi agli ultimi giorni. Seguivamo questa cosa, avevamo tante cose ancora discusse, dei progetti aperti, interrotti. Peccato. Devo dire che diciamo, è stato un uomo tenace, ma è stato soprattutto un uomo sereno e cortese. La cortesia, anzi più che cortese direi gentile, perché la cortesia è una regola di comportamento, se vogliamo è una norma. La gentilezza è una ricchezza dell'animo, come la serenità che l'ha accompagnato fino all'ultimo, ed è una cosa che a me, come a molti suoi amici, manca. Grazie Gianni, grazie per averci mostrato come può essere un uomo.
Grazie Professor Maceri. Thank you, Professor Maceri. And we go on with our Professor Giulio Baglio. I try to introduce again.
Ma non so se mi potete sentire.
Okay, yes.
Ah sì?
Yes, finally we can hear you. Please.
Well, it's difficult for me to talk about Giovanni, not only because my computer did not work, but because I was 30 years older than him, and it does not look fair that I am here to remember him. Over the last year, we phoned each other every week. Sometimes he called me, sometimes I called him. The last phone call took place 6 months ago, early November. He greeted me with a few affectionate words. He gave me the mobile numbers and emails of his sons and his wife. I understood that the 30 years of our friendship were over, and the time for remembrance was about to begin for me. We met in 1982. I was a coordinator of the working group charged with the drafting of the new recommendation on action for the Italian Research Council. There were no wind experts in our group. Luckily, my colleague Alfredo Corsanego spoke to me of Giovanni. He was very young, but already well known in the international community of wind scientists. Giovanni came to meet me in Pavia. He described his studies. He spoke about his international relations. I was impressed. I trusted him. I asked him to submit a proposal for the chapter on wind actions. The recommendations were published with the text written by Giovanni. As consequence, Giovanni was appointed as Italian representative in the preparatory group of Eurocozone actions. At that time, the European wind map did not include Italy, and we considered that was a national shame. And so we decided to provide a map as soon as possible. Giovanni threw himself into the enterprise, and in 1991, the map was put forward in a paper, a first step toward a map of extreme winds. Co-authors Giovanni, Giuseppe Piccardo, Sergio Lagomarsino, and myself. A second publication presented some improvement 3 years later, and finally in 1996 the map was incorporated into Italian and European regulation. Today, 25 years later, Italian law still prescribes Giovanni's map. In the same period, we were working together on the problem of the Park Tower in Milan. This is a slender hexagonal truss steel tower over 100-meter height, 10-meter wide, with an elevator and panoramic viewpoint on the top. It was built in 1933, and the spotlight at the top illuminated the International Art Exhibition. I was entrusted by the Milan administration with the task of evaluating whether it should be demolished or refurbished. I applied the approximate method we proposed, even if I was aware that a static approach cannot be applied to a flexible construction. As a result, I obtained that the tower was supposed to collapse every 10 years, but it was 60 years ago. Old. So two alternatives were possible. Either the tower survival had been miraculous, or the regulation were not able to account for its behavior. I phoned to Giovanni, and Giovanni faced with enthusiasm the problem. The dynamic approach shows that the state of stress was compatible with extreme winds, but at 10 times a year, the vibration of the tower would have caused discomfort or even fright to visitors on the top. I went to visit the old keeper of the tower, already retired at the time. His account was extremely accurate. When a young man and a young lady climbed to the top viewpoint to admire the panorama, it often happened that the oscillation of the tower would cause them a real fright, casting the couple in each other's arms, and love between them was finally declared. In other words, the couple get out happily in love. Giovanni named the tower Cupido, and we decided that Cupido was experimental proof of the accuracy of Giovanni's calculations. In Genoa, when Professor Carlo Cremonini prematurely passed away, the teaching course of metallic construction remained uncovered. Giovanni asked me to take this course as a substitute. He offered to concentrate my lesson on Friday morning, allowing me to reach my flat in Sestri Levante for the weekend. For 3 years, I had lunch with Giovanni every Friday. Gradually, our professional cooperation turned into a sincere friendship. In 2002, our professional paths separate. I was elected Rector of Polytechnic di Milano. Giovanni was at the peak of his scientific career. He was traveling all over the world giving conferences and lectures, receiving prizes and honors. But a fraternal friendship remained between us. I had become like an elder brother. He asked me for advice in any delicate or difficult choice in his private and professional life. We found ourselves together again in 2011, working for the commission in charge examining the project for the bridge over the Strait of Messina, and more recently, together with a group of researchers in hydraulics in Milan, we were involved into a study about the possibility of real-time monitoring water and wind actions on a bridge over the River Po as an alternative to structural rehabilitation. In the phone calls of his last year, I noticed an aspect that was unknown to me before. The deep faith in God that allowed Giovanni to accept what was happening to him. I believe that Giovanni's extraordinary achievements were due to a multiplicity of factors. The mixture of his curiosity and his mathematical preparation allowed him to do research in sectors still unexplored by most. His capacity for innovation pushed him to broaden the fields of his research without ever resting on the border of his own knowledge. His desire to solve the problem of structures gave him the inspiration to find innovative research directions. In Giovanni, these characteristics have always been accompanied by human qualities that are not so common in university. The ability to put the interlocutors at ease, his desire to learn rather than to show off their knowledge. Perhaps for these qualities, Giovanni was loved by everyone, colleagues and students. Bye-bye, Giovanni. I am sure that we shall meet again somewhere. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Professor Baglio, for this long life memory of Giovanni. And now we are approaching to the end of this event. And before closing, on behalf of GS Windine Research Group, I want to warmly thank all persons that contributed to the realization of this event. In particular, let me mention all the UNIGE technical staff that directed, realized, and shared the videos and the streaming. I want to mention them, Laura Guida, Valeria Piras, Eliana Ruffoni, Alberto Baschiera, Alberto Dagnano, Walter Riva. Thank you so much for your kind assistance. I thank again all the speakers who, by sharing their memories, have given us a vivid and unforgettable picture of Giovanni. And finally, I thank all the all people participating to this event. The final contribution comes from our GS Windine group. We all together collect our memories in a short video that close this event. Thank you very much.
Maggiormente mi rimane di lui, della sua figura, è la sua passione per la ricerca e il suo modo di vivere la ricerca, che sicuramente lo ha caratterizzato e ha fatto sì che rimanesse un'impronta nella società anche di ciò che lui ha studiato e dei suoi risultati. Resta per me la principale testimonianza e anche la principale eredità che mi ha lasciato, questo approccio alla ricerca come una componente fondamentale della società.
In the time that I have known him, he was the kind of person who always puts himself in the shoes of his students and try to look at things from their point of view. He was very kind, caring and selfless to the point where he never misses a progress meeting with his students even when he was not feeling very well. I will always consider myself lucky for being supervised by Professor Solari, who had the rare combination of being highly knowledgeable and incredibly humble.
Una delle slide della sua presentazione era una fotografia, raffigurava una fotografia di Jimi Hendrix a Woodstock del 69 e il titolo della slide era From Education to Dissemination. E questo secondo me proprio rappresenta quello che il professore, qual era lo spirito del professore e l'obiettivo del professore, ovvero diffondere la conoscenza della materia, quello che lui aveva appreso in tutti gli anni, le sue esperienze, a più persone possibili nel mondo.
Giovanni Solari had the foresight to propose me a PhD thesis on the new topic, for him too, on which I continue to work today, almost 30 years later. Gianni has always remained a trusted friend to whom I could ask for sincere advice. Thanks for all, Giovanni.
Mi piace ricordare Giovanni soprattutto dal punto di vista umano, una persona di grande sensibilità, di profonda umanità, sempre aperto al confronto e attento alle idee altrui, anche quando queste erano diverse. Una persona proiettata nel mondo, ma profondamente ancorata alla città che amava. Ciao Giovanni.
The first memory I have of Professor Solari dates back to my university student days. I still vividly recall my and my classmates' astonishment for the clarity with which he explained and unrevealed for us the greatest system of engineering. Incredibly, we all understood the most complicated concepts and everyone in the class felt smart. Thank you, Giovanni. Fair winds and calm seas.
Trovare il tempo per i suoi studenti, per il suo lavoro, nonostante le sue condizioni di salute. Per lui i suoi studenti erano tutto, era la sua vita. Penso che le persone che hanno conosciuto il prof Solari avranno sempre un suo ricordo, un qualcosa di indelebile che il prof ha seminato nelle loro menti e nei cuori delle persone che hanno avuto la fortuna di conoscerlo.
Gianni per me è stato un esempio e un punto di riferimento come docente e come ricercatore. Aveva la capacità di spiegare in maniera semplice e intuitiva anche i concetti più complessi. Se ho intrapreso il percorso della ricerca e la carriera accademica è stato grazie al suo esempio. Grazie Gianni.
Professor Solari was also very passionate about the research and determined. Once he told me with his typical way of mispronouncing my first name, please, Joseph, look around for any course that might help you in your PhD research, because together we can make everything possible. Don't you ever hesitate on asking me. We can make it happen.
Aveva la capacità di toccare sempre le corde giuste per motivare i suoi studenti e con lui comunque era sempre possibile anche parlare di qualsiasi argomento. Ad esempio mi ricordo diverse volte in cui abbiamo parlato anche di calcio, di Genoa e degli allenatori che cambiavano molto spesso e mi manca tanto.
A Giovanni piaceva circondarsi di persone brillanti con cui potersi confrontare su argomenti di tipo scientifico, però in realtà cercava nei suoi più stretti collaboratori anche l'aspetto più morale, più etico, di onestà intellettuale. Il mio pensiero va soprattutto a quelle persone che gli sono state più vicine, hanno lavorato con lui fianco a fianco, in particolare ai giovani che devono sentirsi orgogliosi di aver fatto parte del suo gruppo di ricerca, perché di fatto sono dei giovani molto brillanti e intellettualmente onesti.
Professor Solari was an extraordinary researcher, teacher, science communicator and supervisor. His teaching and research will indeed live forever. Let me tell you something. When Professor Solari shows up in a hallway or an office or a conference, everybody wants to say hello. Everybody wants to present their research to him because everybody was so interested in his opinion. The entire science community knew how much knowledge Professor Solari has in the fields of wind engineering, engineering in general, physics, atmospheric sciences, and natural sciences in general. He will be missed, but his legacy will indeed stay forever. Thank you, Professor Giovanni Solari.
Ogni volta di cui avevo bisogno comunque di una sua mano, lui c'era sempre e aveva sempre una parola buona per darmi supporto anche nei momenti di difficoltà. Sì, e mi ha sempre dato il giusto consiglio, la giusta osservazione a livello scientifico per portare a termine il lavoro nel modo migliore.
I will never forget how he managed to make people who work with and around him feel important.
I did enjoy the story of himself as a young researcher working on wheel modeling, or how he was playing football. He knew I love patience and often reminded me that, "Kom, you are not a mathematician, you're an engineer." That has been inspiring me and instructing me on how to do meaningful research. He and being with him are a story that I will always keep in my heart.
I was very fortunate to join the Windyne group in 2012, and I was honored to help Professor Solari along 3 years for the structural engineering course for bachelor students. I could see his immense talent and the dedication to the students. It was clear to me that I was standing in front of a great person that would have changed the lives and the history of wind engineering around the world.
Il professor Solari aveva la capacità di valorizzarti, di farti sentire importante. Ricordo quando pubblicammo il nostro primo lavoro insieme, il giorno della pubblicazione lui mi chiamò e mi riempì di complimenti, quasi come se il lavoro non fosse anche il suo. Il professor Solari aveva a cuore che non solo la nostra ricerca scientifica, ma anche il fatto che tra noi dottorandi nascessero dei rapporti di amicizia, e ricordo come un giorno mi telefonò mentre eravamo in partenza per una vacanza tutti insieme e di fronte a questa notizia lui fu talmente felice che ci disse ragazzi, mi raccomando, divertitevi, io sono con voi, non ci sono fisicamente ma con lo spirito sono con voi.
Grazie a lui ho imparato tantissimo dal punto di vista lavorativo, ma ho imparato tantissimo anche dal punto di vista appunto di fare gruppo, di stare insieme. È stato un maestro di vita, di scienza, e mi accompagnerà sempre. Sono stata veramente fortunata a dividere tanti anni della mia carriera universitaria con lui. Lo ringrazio di tutto. Ciao Gianni.
What I realize now is that each one of the successes that I got in these 10 years I've been working in the wind industry, it's related to something that I learned from him, and so I will be eternally grateful to Giovanni Solari. Grazie Gianni.